Hey friends, Bill here, the director of the George Whitfield program. I want to share with you a couple of thoughts about why we emphasize being full-time like we do. The primary goal here and what we're doing is to be consistent for the long term. 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Being consistent is being consistently evangelizing and being consistent in the locations where we go to evangelize. And so one way to understand this is, none of this is complicated, is how does a church work? How does a local congregation work in terms of people coming and participating? So obviously, typically local churches, they meet at a certain time each week, where they meet once a week or 3 or 4 times a week. Those are consistent times. They meet in a consistent location. And one reason for these things is so people can come. Now there's obviously, if you're working in a church, it helps in organizing and all these kind of things on the inside. But for the outsider, and we as evangelists typically look at people on the outside, for people on the outside, it makes it easier for them to come in whether they are a member or whether they are visiting. If the church met at different times each week, met in different locations, well, it'd be difficult after a while for people to attend because they just couldn't keep track of where the church was going to meet and when and all this kind of stuff. So consistency in a local church really helps people attend and participate. Likewise, for us, consistently out there preaching helps people respond to the word as well. So like if you're preaching at a college campus, we want to emphasize going the same time every week. People get used to seeing you, they get used to responding to you, you become familiar with them, just like a church. You see, and all of a sudden, one guy one week ignores you, the next week they come up and talk to you. And so that's kind of the big idea, and we just don't want to do it for 3 months. We want to do it for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, unless you're going to change locations where you live. And so this is just like a church. A church wants to be where it's at, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, as long as the Lord carries them forward and so forth. And so same kind of thing. And I guess if you had to summarize both goals of the church and the evangelist, is so people can respond to the gospel, so people can be ministered to. And I think that's what we're doing. And so when we say, well, to be part of the George Whitfield program, you need to be out preaching 4 hours a day or so, 5 or 6 days a week. That's because of this. We want to be out. We want people to respond. We want to be at the same place. And evangelistic work, you can go to a campus one day and you can go to downtown another if you live in a busy downtown like Las Vegas or London or something. Or maybe there's, like especially around sports, like in basketball or hockey, they play a ton of games. You go to all the home games there, all the home football games. Before long, you are a consistent presence at these events, not only the particular event, a college campus, a sporting event, or downtown, but you're consistent in that city as well. And people get used to seeing you, and that just leavens the place. It brings light and life of the gospel to bear to more people more often. And so this is the big idea. Preach more, be consistent, just like a church, and impact the area where you're at. There's other ways to think about it, but this is the way we want to think about it because of the end goal, the end game. Preaching Christ so more people can respond, as many as possible. Now, when we travel, or like we put on events, like the Super Bowl, or we're going to go to, Lord willing, 2 weeks in Birmingham, England for the Commonwealth Games. We go for what we perceive to be the beginning and the end of the event. And we want to go out every day because we want to be consistently out amongst the fans and local citizens every day of that event. And so we're applying this principle not only to the daily places where we go in the city in which we live, but when we travel, we're going to apply the principles the same as well, because we're trying to expose people to the word. We want to preach it, we want people to hear it. Faith comes by hearing, some sow, some water. God gives the increase. These are simple Christian ministry principles at work here. And so we're just trying to put them in play as much as possible. So that's why we emphasize that. Also in our own life, by virtue of preaching every day, our Bible study is daily, our prayer life is daily, our spiritual disciplines, you might say, have to increase from when we weren't full time to accommodate this consistent gospel preaching ministry. When you read about George Whitfield, man, he was relentless. In Arnold Dallamore's 2-volume biography, it's staggering how much he preached and the people that he ministered to personally. So he was a relentless evangelist, and he was a great personal minister, but he was a relentless evangelist. He was really consumed with people hearing the gospel and being called to repent and believe. And so that's why it's kind of called the George Whitefield program. We are emulating, in a sense, Whitefield's passion, zeal for the lost, to hear the gospel. And of course, Christians came and heard him as well, but for the lost to the gospel. So same with us. While we're not generating the same response as George Whitefield, some sow, some water, God gives the increase. We're not trying to create a result. God gives the increase. Our goal is to be faithful, and being faithful in an area like we've discussed is the goal and all that comes with that. So hopefully that's helpful to you, and why we want to encourage you to make that transition into full-time work for the benefit of those out there, for the benefit of those people to hear you, for your ability to be somewhere consistently, and all of the blessings and the benefits of the way God has created life that come from our consistent presence at a location.